it with you, keep it in your wallet or whatever. So take one of these before you go too. So I'll wrap it up there, and I hope that will help some of you impress the date. Next time at the sushi bar. I have used this method to impress my date, and 2 years ago took a woman I was interested in to eat sushi, and she was so impressed that even the fact that the very excellent sushi restaurant I'd taken her to with the very excellent chef who I knew very well, mistakes happen, and the fact that a couple of little worms wiggling ended up on one of our plates did not completely convince her never to talk to me again that I had taken her to eat this meal. She was so impressed with the sushi meal that she still stayed with me even after the worms, and 2 years later, I think she's over there in the audience, so I can vouch for my tried and true methods of success at the sushi bar, dating success at the sushi bar. So I'll quit there and be happy. I'm here, of course, to sign books if you want to pick one up, or wow, Christmas is right around the corner, so start thinking about those Christmas presents. Get one signed now, stow it away for your sushi-loving friends or for yourself. So we got plenty of books, and take a sustainable sushi guide with you as well, and more of those postcards if you want. And I'll just check first to see if anybody has any questions about any of this or anything else about sushi. Yeah, sir.
I have a question. When I first started eating sushi in the States, there was a common to buy or to give your Ichimai-san a drink of your beer.
Yeah, right.
And I haven't seen that in the last few years. Whatever happened to that?
Right. Whatever happened to the tradition of buying your sushi chef a beer? Yeah, that's actually a great thing. It happens a lot in Japan. Many of the sushi chefs I talked to, when I would watch them at work, the customers they had good relationships with would often, even American customers would often come in, buy the chef a beer right away or partway through the meal, or even get a bottle of sake and share it around the sushi bar, which is really sweet. I mean, of course, if you can afford to do that, great. But there are some chefs who are up for that kind of thing, and some who aren't, and sometimes it may take a while to get to that point. The history of sushi's coming to the United States and taking root here is a fascinating story with many surprising twists and turns. Of course, I won't even begin to get into that here. It's in the book, but one of the short little points about it was that when sushi first arrived in L.A., it first arrived in the U.S., it basically arrived in L.A. There were a few little places here in New York, but it was in L.A. during the late 70s and early 80s, and there was this kind of Hollywood anything goes wild atmosphere to it. It came in with the celebrities kind of doing everything, trying everything, from cocaine to sushi. And so there was a lot of rapport in those sushi bars out in LA, and I spent a lot of time out in LA researching the history in the book and talking to chefs there. So that was very much a part of sushi at the beginning when it first arrived in the US, and the chefs who did really well at first were the ones whose temperament was suited to that, because they could establish a connection with American customers in a way that a more sober traditional chef couldn't really. Now you get both kinds. Now you have some chefs who are kind of gregarious and open to that, and you get much more serious chefs. There's one chef in Washington, D.C., who I went to, and I tried to buy him a drink, and he would have none of it. He was just like, he was sort of had this samurai code, like he wasn't going to relax at all. But that was his personality. That was him. A lot of people love that restaurant because they feel like they're getting something authentic there because it's so strict, like it's so strictly Japanese. I mean, to me, that's just a stereotype. My experience of eating in Japan is that it's a lot of fun generally, and there's a lot of chatting and give and take and rapport between chefs and customers at any kind of restaurant that has a bar situation. So I really enjoy that. So, you got, like I said, you got to shop around. It may take a while to get to that point with a chef, but it's always a good first move to try, and try it again later to get in with a chef. Anything else? Yeah.
What sushi would you recommend trying? You're the typical person who usually eats tuna.
What sushi would you recommend trying? Well, right. How do you know what's the traditional fish?
Well, I guess maybe it's an acquired taste, but
well, some of them are acquired tastes and some are not. If you go to a pretty good, sushi, like any sushi bar that has pretty decent quality, and you sit at the bar and you say that my advice to people is always say to the chef, look, I don't really know what I'm doing. I'm very interested in trying the type of sushi that a Japanese customer would eat, and I'm interested in trying something different from the usual, fish that are so common in American sushi, something more of a traditional Japanese fish. But I'm not sure, quite how adventurous I am yet. Can you start me off on something that's, fairly simple and mild, but a little different than, the usual tuna or salmon? And, if it's a good place, I'm sure they'll have some very good quality, milder, light fish like a flounder or a snapper of some kind, or maybe even a sea bream at some of the better places. And these were the fish that were the top fish, for Japanese sushi eaters before this whole era of tuna took over. Or there's smaller fish, aji. Some of these fish have very unappetizing names in English, which is probably why we don't eat them. Horse mackerel, gizzard shad. But in Japanese, these are very popular, normal fish that are frequently eaten at the sushi bar. So I think if you can find a chef who responds well to the suggestion that you want to be educated by that chef, then, that actually gives them a chance to pull out some of the stuff that they really want to do but don't really get a chance to do. So that's how I would, I wouldn't necessarily advise you to choose specific fish because it's going to depend on that day and what they have that's really good. But entrusting yourself to the chef to some extent, but then qualifying, it's okay. Here's how adventurous I am on the scale. Work with me. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes. Sure.
Is it true that women can become sushi chefs?
Yes, absolutely. There's no hope for women to ever become sushi chefs, so give it up right now. And that's what many Japanese chefs in Japan would tell you. Many women who try to become sushi chefs, that is exactly the response they get. There are a whole list of reasons that are provided why women can never become sushi chefs. Your hands are too warm. Yeah, medically that's not strictly accurate. You wear perfume. Yeah, I don't have to. There's all these things like, women are going to ruin sushi. And I've got a whole chapter, on women and sushi, and I delve into this whole question. What the heck's going on here? And many of the women who try to become sushi chefs in Japan end up coming to the U.S. because it's the only place where, they feel that there's a bit more of a chance for them to do it. There are beginning to be a few women-run sushi places in Japan. There's a number of female sushi chefs in the U.S. now. My main character in the book is a female sushi chef. There's several women that I follow through this story. And so it's beginning to change. It's beginning to change, which is good. But most of the reasons for it that are given traditionally are just ludicrous. And, this is just Japanese male, patriarchy. I mean, like there is in every other traditional field in Japan. And, it's beginning to change. One of the very interesting things I learned was that women customers often feel uncomfortable at sushi bars in Japan as well. Not just trying to become chefs, but just being a customer at one. Because a lot of these sushi bars, especially during the 80s when, there were all these big Japanese companies with huge expense accounts, it was like these old boys clubs where, the businessmen would go in and eat all the sushi on the expense account. And there's a very interesting woman who was a publishing executive in Japan. She became a very powerful executive in the publishing world. And she kept getting a cold shoulder at sushi bars from these chefs. And she's like, she's a vice president of a company. And she couldn't understand what was going on. So she actually decided to travel around to Japan and visit all these famous sushi bars and see what her experience was like. And she wrote a book about it called One Woman Sushi. And it's really cool. She goes and she talks about all the different experiences and like the weird ways that women are discriminated against on both sides of the sushi bar and sushi restaurant. But, just a quick footnote to that, after the economic bubble, in Japan, the economy's tanked and things are not as rosy and they don't have those expense accounts. And all those old boy club sushi bars are struggling. So, and now, of course, you get many more young independent women who have disposable income in Japan, who are working or delaying having kids or whatever, getting married. And so there's a whole new type of sushi bar that's opened up to cater to that clientele. And it's totally different. They aren't these like dark, small, wood-paneled sushi bars. They're these light, airy places. They got like jazz playing on the stereo, and a TV showing CNN, and they've got sushi with like Western ingredients and smoked duck sushi with red wine and the rice and stuff. And these upwardly mobile career women who can't be bothered to go, do battle with some patriarchal old sushi chef are flocking to these places. But it's really cool. So I think there's a lot of room for growth there, and it's starting to change, which is good. And maybe I'll end on that note. I mean, the surprising history of sushi, the biggest surprise of it for me was realizing that it's been a history of constant change. I mean, the sushi that we know today is now we have all this Americanized sushi, and then before that there was Japanese sushi, but it's gone through millions of different incarnations throughout its evolution in history, and the background to it is very surprising. So if you're interested in that too, pick up a copy of the book. Sushi doesn't even come from Japan. Okay.